10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Look, up in the sky, it's a bird.
It's a plane.
There's no need to fear.
I'm black, y'all, and I'm black, y'all, and I'm blacker than black, and I'm black, y'all, and I'm black, y'all, and I'm black, y'all, and I'm blacker than black, 'cause I'm black.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Super Black, an all-black panel podcasting experience where we talk about all things superhero, past, present, and future. From Marvel and DC to anime, there is no stone we will leave unturned as we take a deep dive into the genre of superpowered individuals and the worlds they inhabit. I am your friendly neighborhood host, Zuri Washington. I use she, her pronouns, and you can follow me on IG at Zuri with a fringe on top. That's Zuri with a Z, not Suri with an S. I'll leave it to the rest of today's super panel to introduce themselves. Take it away.
Well, hello, my name is Rolls Andre, and I've been collecting comics since they were 50 cents in American money, and I'm here to talk comics and hang out with y'all. You can find me on Instagram, Rollsie, ROLLSIE.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? My name is Quentin. If you like seeing people's dreams come true, I have a dream that you can help me out with. I'm currently petitioning to become the next Static Shock in Michael B. Jordan's upcoming film. So if you can sign my petition in my Instagram, Quentin Oat, that'd be amazing. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Sheridan. My pronouns are she, her, and you can follow me on Instagram at Island Zephyr Cooks. I cook food. That's the Island Zephyr Cooks. I cook food.
Oh, you cook food.
I cook food. Did you know? Now you know.
But is it fashion?
It's very fashion. It's very that. It's very that.
And don't forget to follow the podcast on IG at Super Black Podcast, or you can follow us on Twitter at Super Podcast. Now that we are all assembled, let's get started. So today we have a very special guest in our Spotlight series. He began his career as an intern at Marvel Entertainment and worked his way up in the comics industry to eventually launch DC Comics' first webcomics imprint and drafted the blueprints for their digital comics initiative. He made a splash in the creative pool, launching a crowdfund for what became the critically acclaimed Black, a graphic novel that asks the question, what if only Black people had superpowers? Please give a warm welcome to Kwanza Osayjefo.
Hey, how you guys doing?
Hey, we're good. We're so happy to have you. And also congratulations on everything that has developed with Black recently. I know that Gerard McMurray is signed on to direct the movie and Warner Brothers and all that good stuff. So that's all like super, super exciting.
Very, very exciting. I've been sitting on that one for a while, not able to say anything.
I'm sure.
That was not scary. So I'm very excited about it. He has an amazing vision for the film. So much so that I actually joked with him that I'm jealous about some of the ideas, and that since he's technically making it based off of my books, I might steal some of it.
That's good.
Yeah, it's just an exchange. Yeah. A mental exchange. But Kwanza, tell the audience, our listeners, and us a little bit more about yourself. Where are you originally from?
I am a New York City native. I'm a townie. So I grew up in Brooklyn, and now I live in the Bronx. You know, I keep my boroughs with bees in front of them and stuff. That's how I represent. You know, the four boroughs. And yeah, I've been a comic book fan since just out of diapers, and it's always just been a passion of mine. It's always been something that's been a part of my DNA.
And I know that I mentioned you started at Marvel. What was that like for you? What was your experience in starting out in the comic world, as it were?
I mean, it was interesting because I didn't know that was a job. like a real job, because when you're a kid growing up reading comic books, you think they're made by like keyboard elves or whatever. You don't know how funny it's like. It's like, how's this made? I don't know. Just give me my allowance. I want to get this book. But it was actually Milestone that led me to Marvel. So for your listeners who probably may have just been introduced to Milestone was one of the first like BIPOC, imprints back in the 90s. And, I'd grown up reading comic books, and when all of those sort of like hit the shelves, it was the first time that I kind of realized that the thing that was missing from comic books was me. People who look like me and stories about people like me. And it was so very inspiring that I actually paid attention to the credits for once, and I was like, oh, these are made by people. This is a job. This is a job that Black people can have. Okay. That's kind of what like really made it seem like a real thing that was tangible to me. So I was in high school at the time, and so I read the indicia, found Milestone's phone number, and called them up. And basically just said I was like the hot new artist, writer, whatever. It's like, you got to look at my portfolio, check it out. I had no portfolio. So I put on the phone, and they said, yeah, come on in. So I got an interview at Milestone. So like I scrambled, found myself a portfolio like literally in the trash, not even kidding, in the trash, together like all my like little, high school edition ideas for comics, and showed up and thought that it was just, I didn't know what to think, but they ended up taking me in to meet with Dwayne McDuffie, who at the time was the editor-in-chief, and he was very kind and looked through all of my stuff and, basically said, maybe you're not ready right now, kid. By maybe, I mean, you're not ready, but why do you want to be in comics? And he essentially just took the time to essentially like break down the comics industry for me. And it's what I've often called like, he gave me the green book for navigating comic books, because he was very clear about the fact that I needed to learn about the industry, do the work, know how to go to convention, know how to pitch editors, but also know how to navigate those spaces as a person of color. Because he was very clear that there was a reason that Milestone was in their offices and not at DC. Yeah, he's like, these are things that you're going to have to be aware of. And so, taking his advice, like I got an internship at Marvel. Like I think it was my junior year of college, but then I went and did a study abroad instead. It's like I got the chance to go to Japan. I'll be back. I got it again in the second time around, and that was my senior year. And yeah, they ended up hiring me like fresh out of school. And that was all thanks to Dwayne's advice. Like literally, I had all the like cheat sheets for like how to break into the industry. And it was very eye-opening, because again, this is something that was a career, and getting to see how like that end product that you love so much is made, like really was like sobering. But at the same time, I wouldn't change any of it, because I had also come to Marvel like right after the bankruptcy. So it was very much like walking into like Game of Thrones kind of Elden Ring sort of world. That moment where it's like, Lord, I thought that this was like, okay. Because it was very much about like, okay, well, let me sit down and like learn. It's not going to be. This isn't Disneyland here. This is like this is work. Like things go into producing these products, and there's fun to be had, but at the same time, it's a job. Disney hadn't bought Marvel yet, so
nope.
But my stocks though,
right? If we knew now then what we know now. But have you ever been able to maintain a connection to, or have you spoken again to Dwayne McDuffie since then?
Sadly, no, because he passed away. And actually, I almost did have a chance to. This was probably I just transferred out to the Burbank offices. So when DC had their big move, and I was at San Diego Comic-Con on the con in the DC booth, and I see Dwayne like across the booth from me, and I'm like, I gotta go talk to this man, like, and just he's not gonna remember me, but it doesn't matter. Like, I just need him to know. It's like, I'm here because of you. Like, and I just want to thank you. I don't have any flowers on me, so it'll all be like verbal. but I'm a product of like what was only like a minuscule amount of your time. But this dude dressed in an Aquaman outfit stopped me to ask me like something about some signings, it's always Aquaman.
Damn it, Aquaman.
It's why you're the worst, Aquaman. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, so they're like, do I look like a fish? Why are you talking about it? So, this guy stopped me for a second, and then I look up, and Dwayne was gone. And I never knew he passed away.
Oh, wow.
Wow. That's crazy.
Wow.
That was just like really upsetting to me because it's like that was the one time I should have done the mush. It's like, welcome, man. You're not even the Jason Momoa version.
Honestly, what other version is there? I do like the version that's in Justice League Unlimited, though. He got a hook for a hand.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean that's when Aquaman started getting feral and stuff like that.
Yeah.
People were just like, all right, angry fish, I got you. You get a little Namor in your step.
Yeah, I mean, he was pretty Caucasian. He was pretty, he was like pretty boring compared to like a lot of superheroes. Like Namor looks like so cool, He's got like feathers on his feet and stuff, and you get like Aquaman be like, hey, how you guys doing? What's up? How are you? Very boring.
Like he was like, I am the ruler of most of this planet. Like you're not gonna play me. Like it's one of my favorite scenes early on in the House of X storyline when Xavier goes to Namor and he's just like, hey, the mutants are getting together, we're gonna build a utopia. And he was just like, yeah, come to me when you get your big boy pants on. Like just did not care. I was like, okay, Namor.
Okay. Kind of going back into your origin story, as it were, I never know how to every time I read it, I'm like, what does this mean? So if you could explain for myself and the audience, you went on to DC at some point and you became an editor of the DC Comics Zuda. If you could explain imprints to everyone, because it's not something I'm familiar with.
DC is the king of imprints. They've had and folded so many. It's kind of amazing. So imprints are essentially where they would create these sort of little publishing studios within DC itself. So one of the first ones was Vertigo, and Vertigo is what brought us Sandman, Hellblazer, Lucifer. A lot of those more dark and more literature sort of stuff. Yeah, it's what launched Gaiman's career, Alan Moore, Grant Morrison, basically all the truly prolific writers, of the day and stuff like that. And after the success of that, they went into all sorts of other imprints. So they had CMX, which I think was kind of manga influence. They had Minx, which was their early foray into YA. And then Zuda, came along in early mid 2000s or something like that. Mm-hmm. And this was, seeing that webcomics were blowing up online, decided to venture into that space. And it was kind of the first of its kind because Zuda essentially operated off of, what was going on in the web, which was more of a crowdsource, public domain in terms of what got published, So we would actually have 10 entries every month of original comics, and we would let the public vote on them. So we would pay these artists and writers. I would pick the submissions. We'd put them on the site for a month, and whichever one got the most votes became a regular ongoing series. So it was a way to really get in a lot of interesting stuff, especially people of color, because that wasn't happening. And I got to pick some too that were just out of the gate this is really good. So one of our lead launch titles, Bayou, created by Jeremy Love. It was this amazing story that's, during the antebellum era of the South, where this young black girl is kind of going on this very dark Alice in Wonderland journey into this mystical world to save her father, who's been accused of breathing near a white person. And yeah, I mean, it's
real.
It's a really great story that has all these fantastic characters in there. So if you like Lovecraft country, you love Bayou. Same vibe before that happened, where it's just when them Gollywog girls came out, I was clutching the blanket but it's because I saw those same kind of characters in Bayou and stuff like that. So
how long did you work in both of those scenarios, with Marvel and then with DC? How did you move on to self-producing?
So I was with Marvel for 3 years, and then I think I was with DC for 6 or 7.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So like Zuda was a good chunk of my career, and then like DC Digital when I moved out to LA. But once I left, comic books didn't leave me, or my passion for it didn't leave. And so the idea for Black was something I had thought of like almost 10 years prior to when we launched it. And it was just one of those ideas that, just kind of stuck in my head and stuff. And, I have like a ton of ideas, and my wife was just like, just pick one. Pick one. And do the ideas. Stop telling me about it. Tell the people about it. Like, just pick one. And so, Black was the one that I picked. I was like, it's always been a concept that was very succinct and clear in my head. And, times have changed from even when we launched Zuda to the extent that we now had crowdfunding. We went from like crowdsourcing to crowdfunding. Right. And so, I hit up my creative partner, Tim Smith, who had worked on it a little bit beforehand. And I was like, yeah, remember that idea that we kind of shelved? Because he worked at Marvel while I was working at DC. And I was just like, we're not working there anymore, so let's do this. And he ended up going back and working with us. So I was just like, well, whatever. But the point is that we put it on Kickstarter, and like in the first 3 days we hit our goal. Like, so we went on there, we're like, we need like 30,000. We hit that in like 3 days, and I think by the time we ended, we were at like 92,000 or something like that. So that was pretty wild, like watch, because back then I had like the Kickstarter app on my phone with the alerts. So I'm at work, and it's just going like, like. And like day one, like we got like a movie offer, and like I was like, I don't even have an agent, I don't have a publisher, like I didn't plan that far ahead. So it was one of the craziest weeks in my life where I had to get a lawyer, get a manager, get a publisher, because publishers were coming like after us too, and I was just like, well, we got the money, so we don't kind of need the publisher part, but but it was a very wild week, but awesome because it felt very validating, in a space where I think a lot of publishers would have said no to that idea.
You came up with Black 10 years prior, and it came out in 2016, so 2006. But it was, 2016 was 2016, as we all know. And everyone, I'm sure when they read Black, they feel like it's very topical, that it feels like it was of that particular time. But to hear that you had created this idea 10 years prior is really like mind-blowing, and also speaks to kind of like the cyclical nature of Black experience in the country, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's cyclical, but it's also, in a sense, in regards to like what's on people's radar. People said it was very timely. It's like, one of the key themes in the story is that the protagonist, is shot and killed by the police, but that is not timely. It's sadly, a long part of our history, as Black people in America being, murdered by the police. And it's sort of this thing where when people said that, I was just like, just because you have it on your Facebook and in your Instagram feeds now doesn't mean that it wasn't happening before. There's this really interesting period in time that like your grandparents may have told you about called the Civil Rights Movement. Yeah, they had video then too. That was like part of, Martin Luther King's like whole campaign. Yeah, I know you only know the one quote, but what I'm saying is this is not new. It's just new to you.
Most of the time, if they haven't talked to them about it, it's probably because they were the people at the lunch counters yelling.
Yep.
First of all, the covers of Black are so, I'm going to try to pull them up right now, but the covers of Black are just so graphic and so... I hate using the word iconic, but I think that they're like the iconography within them is so strong. But for example, the one where it's the American flag and someone Black is holding the bars of the American flag as if they're in jail. And then there's a lynching happening on the front cover of another. Like, they're just such powerful images. Kari Randolph, who did the cover art for Black, did a phenomenal job. Because if nothing else, if I didn't know what this was and I was walking past the comic section in Barnes & Noble or whatever, that would grab my attention. And you there's only a few colors that are used. So it's not like it's a full color spread. It is black, it is white, and shades of gray sometimes, but black, white, and red are like the primary things. So I just think that he did a wonderful job. Where did the ideas for the cover art come from in the styling?
So it's interesting because when I first approached Kari, we've known each other in the industry for quite some time. I mean, it's no secret that most Black people in comics kind of know each other because we have to.
Right.
But we had something of a bond because people would often confuse us, like in the industry, even though we don't look a thing alike. So when I say people, you know who I mean. But when I approached him about it was because, Kari had such a distinct style that I think like really, had its influences in anime and street art and graffiti. And I thought that was something that would complement the covers very well. But after reading the pitch and understanding like what the concept was, Kari was just like, I really have a different take on what we're going to do for this cover. Because at that time it was only going to be a book. We weren't going to do the periodicals. He's like, let me show you something. And I wasn't on the fence. I was like, oh really? Like, what are you thinking? He's like, I just want to show you, but I'm just going to say Banksy. And the minute he said that, I was like, I'm good. I was like, that's how Banksy's work. So I'm just like, yeah, let's go. And so he comes back with the, like sort of, stenciled spray kind of, spray paint kind of style with the hands up, don't shoot. Character that has become pretty much the, iconic defining piece of art for Black. And the minute I saw that, I was just like, yes, you have completely captured where we're going with this book. And then when we sort of linked up with Black Mass Studios and they asked about doing periodicals, was when we're like, okay, well, now I got to come up with 5 more. So that's when Kari and I started collaborating and stuff like that on the covers, and I would just rattle off sorts of themes and ideas and stuff like that. And sometimes I would even draw stuff. So like the cover that's like, that people have called Honky Kong, I drew that like on an iPad very badly and sent it over to him. It was like something like this, and he was just like, okay, bet. So a lot of that was just like, back and forth between us and me going like, oh, let's do this, let's do that. I think the hardest one was the cover to number 2 with like the, lynching, because I wanted to just take one hard pause in it and with the themes and like superhero stuff and bring it together into something that was historical but still put a hint of like what Black was about. So you'll notice that like one of the characters is actually expressing a superpower very subtly on that cover. And it's just one of those things where it's like we wanted those covers to be arresting so that when you're in a comic book store, these were not something that you were just going to walk past.
Yeah.
Because they're very stark, they're very simple. They are telling a story almost on their own.
Yeah.
And that's what I wanted the covers to do, because I often find comic book covers don't tell enough story. They're very rendered, like your eyeballs, like your eyes are busy. Yeah, they're very busy. And we wanted to do something that was really minimalist and really focused on like, no, we've got something that we're saying here.
Right.
Pay attention. Even with the title of it, Black was not the original title, but like after going back and forth, like I was just like, well, what are we talking about here? To myself, like, Self, what kind of story is this? And I was just like, let's just not beat around the bush. I can't trademark it, but I'm just going to call it Black. That's it. Because that really distilled down what we were doing, because we were also trying to tell these stories from a perspective and through certain narratives that had never existed in comics before, or that, the powers that be didn't have the purview or the stones to tackle.
Right. And the sequel, White, in the same respect, you went from Black to White. Very simple title, but basically explains in and of itself the direction in which you were taking the story after Black ended, after the first 6 issues of Black ended, where we were going. And all of a sudden, Theodore Mann, the antagonist, has become, all of a sudden, it's been 3 years, but still, for those of us who are just reading, it's like very suddenly this man who seems pretty much like evil has become the president of the United States.
I know, that sounds so weird in fiction, right?
It's so weird. Can't possibly happen here.
I know, unrealistic.
But I really, that first cover for White is red. It's mostly red, unlike the other covers, which kind of had highlights of red in there. I thought it was really like kind of the blood redness of it, of the cover, and seeing this man, like no pun intended, but seeing this man just standing there, Evita style, Mussolini style, just hearkening to the people. And it was really, it's discomforting. It's discomforting because of what we have experienced in the last, God, it feels like 30,000 years. I am only 30 years old, but it feels like it's been forever. But the last 6 to 7 years of what we've experienced politically in the country, and to just kind of watch it distilled into this one moment.
Yeah. It was an interesting response because it was always my intention for this story to progress that way. But much like when I did Black, I had this moment when we were about to put it up because, Obama was still in office where I'm like, it's like, are we post-racial? Like, I legit thought that. I was like, am I digging up something that, like, maybe we're about to move past it? But then I was just like, no, they still killing Black people. Let me put this up here. In turn, I knew that I had always wanted Black to be, a trilogy. But I also knew that in what Black itself stood for, there would have to be a sort of counter to that or a reaction to that. And it's like you almost can't tell that story and acknowledge the idea of like what Black is, what it means, what it comes from, where it comes from, and not have white exist. Right. And white is essentially, there's Black. What if only Black people had superpowers? And white is, and how will white people be feeling about that if that happens? So, and it takes place specifically in the United States. And I always intended for like man to become president, and then that fool became president, which is like also just strange because the cover to issue 4, actually that issue came out the day of his inauguration. And I made that cover, we made that cover as kind of, it was meant to be a parody. Nobody thought he would win. So just like, but he represented something, that I wanted to, have expressed in a piece of art. And now I just wish maybe we should have put Hillary Clinton on it. I don't know. Maybe the book has been prophesized and stuff. Should have put her on there.
There have been so many instances of like, not just with 45 and everything, but like there have been so many instances of artists predicting the effing future. It's really crazy, honestly. And maybe it's just because we have the imagination to imagine the most inane things and, this could never happen. So let me fictionalize it. Let me put it pen to paper and put it down. But, dinosaurs did it too.
Zuri and I met doing a show that was kind of like showing a post-apocalyptic Trump world. That's how we met, right? In 2016, doing Kant. And it was like just kind of like we were like, there's no way he's gonna win. And before our show opened was election day, and he won, and it was like, oh my God.
I think it's one of those things where it's like people like in some respect it feels like it's prophetic, but really it's just looking at history.
Sure.
And especially our history in this country. And I think one of the funniest like moments in television was a skit that Dave Chappelle and Chris Rock did on SNL, like after the election, and those two, and their whole thing was they were not surprised. Like the white actors were like losing their minds.
That was great.
And that's kind of how it felt, because there's so many things that I've like written through both of these stories where people, felt like the things that were fictitious were what things that happen in reality. So I've had like critics go like, the cops will just shoot those kids like that, and I was like, that's the unreal part here is people shooting laser beams out of their eyes. That's the fictitious part. But the part that you can't believe, even though that happens in reality, is this part. The part you can't believe, like people, like at one point people were like, oh, I can't believe like that the one of the antagonists from the previous book was elected president of the United States. I'm like, why wouldn't you believe that?
Right.
It's like people who have shoplifted have gone to jail longer and been prosecuted faster than the person who was in the White House and stole secret documents. Like, these are facts.
Committed full treason. Full treason.
Oh, not half treason.
Not a little light treason. Full, heavy treason.
Breathe freely. You know, so it's that kind of stuff where it's just like, this isn't fiction. That part's not fictitious. Like, people being able to control water or, like, you know, smoke weed and talk to trees. Like, that is one of the characters' powers, by the way. It is fiction, you know?
Yeah, I think you're so right, because it really is about having a knowledge of where we have come from and just kind of seeing the patterns as they play out. This is the logical conclusion can only be X, Y, and Z if you're really paying attention, because then you're not shocked. I wasn't shocked. I went to bed early on election night because I knew. I said good night. I was like, I'm tired. I was a poll worker all day, because that's what I do, my due diligence in this country and try to get people to vote. I went to sleep because I knew at 8 p.m. or like 9 p.m. when I got home that night, before they had finished really, really counting in everything. But I said, this doesn't feel good. I'm going to sleep. And I think that it would behoove most people to know their history. We were talking in a different episode about representation in Hollywood, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we talked about Disney's Song of the South. I prefer Disney put Song of the South on Disney Plus so that I could watch it over and over and over again to know where we came from. You can always find it on like bootlegs and stuff like that. But I would love for them to put it up, put that little disclaimer that they like to put before Peter Pan or whatever, and like so that little kids have there are small children, because when I was little, I didn't know what Zippity Doodah came from, but there are kids today that certainly do not know, that have no concept, and their parents will never tell them.
Right. And also, just like the era that came out in was also an era where it's like I grew up reading, like, you know, having my parents read stories of like Brer Rabbit, Anansi, and all that stuff to me. So when I heard Brer Rabbit, Disney, let's go, my parents were like, nah. You see that? I was like, well, we can go see Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. I don't want to see that. It's like, I want to see the one with the black guy in it, and they're just like, no.
Right. It's a dirty, shameful thing that has kind of gotten swept aside, but it explains to me there's so many decisions that not just Disney, but that industries at large have made over the years that are steeped in our history. It makes sense when you look at it, but if you don't know the history, then you're like, what? They didn't let black people live in those neighborhoods? Why?
Right? I mean, like, they didn't take Dumbo off. It wasn't in the CGI. Those crows weren't in the CGI version. So I'm like, they had the best song, though. It's like,
they did have the song.
But that scene popped.
Good song. Great song.
It's like, I'm mad at it, but I'm also not.
I think for those who don't know, like, we've talked about, like, black existing in a world where only black people, and a small percentage, it's not like every black person in the context of black has superpowers. There's not a percentage of society that is just like, we're black and we all have superpowers, woo! It is like maybe a 1% of black people who have superpowers in the context of black. I think that what's interesting to me, because I've read some of other interviews that you've had about X-Men, because people would most likely directly correlate this with X-Men for a variety of reasons. You have like a kind of Professor X figure who's collecting people, a bunch of people with varied superpowers who are part of a super group or various super groups. But I know that you've also gone on record as saying that the allegory or the perpetuated allegory of using X-Men as like they're talking about race, but not talking about race in the context of X-Men. I know that that's not something that you like key into, or that you like being perpetuated about the X-Men comic book franchise, just in general? Can you speak more to like your opinion about how Marvel has?
Absolutely. I think, X-Men is one of those books that I grew up loving as a kid. I think a lot of Black people gravitated towards X-Men and stuff like that in their younger years. And still enjoy it. I'm loving Krakoan era of X-Men. Queen Regent Storm of Mars, like, let's go. I'm all about it. But, there was a point in time, during my comic book, like reading history, where that allegory just started falling flat for me. Because I'm just, when you look at these characters, you're just like, okay, but Cyclops, just keep your glasses on and you could go get yourself a good job. It's like Jean Grey, nobody's throwing your resume in the trash. Like Wolverine, nobody's pulling you over because you're driving a nice car. If they did, that'd be the end of them. But the point is that your allegory falls short of the subject matter that you're trying to, make a very sort of, for lack of better terms, whitewashed, acceptable version of, racism that in some respect actually takes a lot away from the reality of it, because you're on one hand trying to make it palatable and inclusive of people who are white, but you're also downplaying it because it's almost like a choice for a lot of them. It's like the Beast and Nightcrawler. Yeah, they got things to deal with, but maybe they could shave. I don't know. But, for the rest of them, they're just, they're all attractive white people who really are only persecuted when they flex. And it's like, I don't know, don't turn into steel. I'm Black all the time. This does not stop. Right. This is an immutable trait. So that for me is when it clicked in my head, and that's actually part of when the idea of like, well, what if only Black people had superpowers clicked in my head, and I was just like, I think that might be something.
Yeah, I think there are probably a lot of people who are very mad at you and the existence of this piece because they see you as bringing politics into the comic book sphere. Not that you would be the first person to do that, but I think, I can't remember if this was in another interview, but I've been reading Dr. Sheena Howard's book on Black comic history, and it's very rare for a comic book to be apolitical, just in general. And it also depends on how people define politics as. Because for me, the politics are personal. People would like to keep them separate somehow. But if you think that the X-Men weren't being political, then I don't know what you were reading in any capacity. They tried to change laws. There's senators. So many comic books have senators at the forefront of the work that they're trying to accomplish and giving mutants their rights. Or even Annie from the old Annie comic strip, it was a whole manifesto against communism. So, politics only matter when I guess you don't agree with them.
Yeah. I made a joke of I should start referring to myself as politicized American instead of African American, because that's the real truth of it. I'm not political. You've made me political because you're trying to create the newest term that doesn't get you slapped. It's so sometimes it's I'll call myself CRT American. I'm woke American, because it's those are all just terms that you use to cover up the fact that you are anti-Black or that you're anti-LGBTQ. It's not cute, and it's not a good scheme. I can see right through it, and so can a lot of people. But those people who think that Black is political basically just have a limited framework of the world. And they show it by making statements like that, because the superhero is political. What is a superhero besides a vigilante who is taking the law into their own hands, who is not federally or locally mandated to do anything, but goes out because they have power and decides to take matters into their own hand, which I guess is the biggest white person fantasy in the entire world. But the fact of the matter is that's political. Superman, the archetype of most superheroes, is political. Go and read any of the old original Superman where he had the ballet slippers on. It was all political. Like, that's exactly what it was based off of. You know, so when people try to pretend, or Watchmen, the entirety of Watchmen is like politics. So it's like when people, you know, try to like use the word political as something that shouldn't exist in comics, it's a lie. It's a falsehood. Like, no, you're against black stories and black perspectives being in comics, and you can talk until you're blue in the face, which would be a good shade on you. You're full of crap. I'm not going to cuss on here. It's like you're full of crap. You're just anti-black, and you can be mad about it if you want. The same way you're mad about being called racist, but you're not mad about doing racist stuff. Like, that's not a problem.
Right. It's that the two Americas, and that's what I'm seeing in your comics. You know, black versus white. It's the two Americas. It is, you know, the people who are like, oh, America, this wonderful country. Nobody ever got hurt in the forming of this country. Maybe a few British people, but nobody else. And like glossing over the genocide of Native Americans, glossing over the fact that black folks were kidnapped and brought here. And they just, it's that, like you said, like, this is political. How dare you? This is
and also as if we have no right to be angry.
Yeah, if you don't have a right to explore those stories. I mean, it's fertile ground for telling interesting stories. It's fertile ground for basing a superhero world off of, where the stakes are actually rooted in something that exists. Like, I don't have to come up with something like the Sentinels in this story. I just have the police. You know, I don't have to come up with the idea of why these white characters are persecuted. The superpowers are like a cherry on top for, like, you know, sci-fi geeks and comic book lovers. I could even just made it black with no powers. It would have been the same story.
And people definitely would have been drawing those inferences to, or those ties to, just the African American experience. And once again, like, half of that, like, X-Men allegory situation.
Right, which is like X-Men is the allegory. It's not the other way around. It's like I scraped all that off. It's like, you put all this whitewash on here, like Tom Sawyer. Let me just get this off. That is a black experience underneath there. Look at that.
I was just starting to think that Scooby-Doo. It's like, let's see who the real person is. Like, it's Fred pulling up the mask. One of the things that I think is really interesting in Black thematically is there's kind of a generational divide or a generational conversation that is being had, both in Black and in white. In white, obviously, you have old dude and his son, and just how they deal with things is very different. But then in Black, you have Kareem, who's our protagonist, who is the young man who got shot and killed, but then didn't die by the police. And I think, is it O and Juncture, which it turns out O is Juncture's actual son, blood-related son. And so this kind of conversation that's being had between three different generations of Black men about how to address their civil rights. And I think you put it best in the comic. It's the difference between emancipation, retaliation, and representation, which I thought was really poignant, because that is a conversation that I have with my family, or with my grandma versus my mom versus my aunt. My mom is like, why are you going to these marches right now? Or why are you doing this? Like, she's scared for me. And she's like, or she's been scared for me in the past. She's since gotten a little better about it. And she's like, yes, my daughter, amazing. But it's a fear of the unknown. Should we be happy with how things are, that we are just like alive and not slaves? Like, should that just be the extent of what we aim for in terms of our own freedom from subjugation? But yeah, I think that it was just a really interesting way to frame it against this backdrop of otherworldly, supernatural, blood-born power, and what you do with that. Great power comes with great responsibility. We've heard it time and time again. How do you use that power to better yourself and your people?
The real reason that I wanted to have those dynamics is because I didn't really want Black to have an actual protagonist. I think people often see Man as a protagonist, but he is just like a part of the climate to me in the story.
Sure.
And really the way I try to set it up is that there's just different points of view in there. And it's easy to think that he is the antagonist because like he's the rich white guy who does. I was like, yeah, I know, but like that dude's like a typhoon or whatever. You know what that is. But in telling a story where like the majority of the cast is Black, I also wanted to show like, you know, Black people not as a monolith. There's a bunch of differing views and viewpoints in how you would deal with something supernatural like this existing, you know, and how that would play into some of our existing, like, you know, politics and positions in terms of like how we exist in this country. And so with Juncture, I definitely like wanted to set him up as somebody who, you know, he had seen war, he had fought, and he was tired, you know, and he was thinking more about protecting his people, you know, and maybe with like a little sprinkle of respectability politics in there, but like really just being about like, hey, we don't have the means to really go toe to toe with this crazy planet like this, so I'm just going to keep me and mine safe the best way I can. And then you have his son, you know, who for reasons that will continue to unfold is very much the opposite. It's just like, we have power. We have a power that, you know, should make us the top of the food chain, and we should use it in the same way that it's used by other people, you know? So it's almost like as much as his antagonism is towards like white America or white imperialism, it's also just against the idea of like this group that I'm against also has power that they use. Why wouldn't we use ours? You know, in order to defend ourselves. It doesn't make sense to him. It's like, make it make sense, Pops, make it make sense. And then there's, you know, Kareem, who's completely new and thrown into this, a teenager of all things, you know, and I really wanted to show him as a character. It's like, look, man, I don't like 15-year-olds or teenage characters that you throw them into some mess like this and they're suddenly like really capable and smart.
Yeah.
It's like, nah. It's like, I was dumb when I was 15. If you had thrown me into this, it would have been mess. And, you know, I really wanted to show how he struggles with dealing with all of these, with Man, with Juncture, with and how he, like, comes to his own terms of, like, who he wants to be in the world. You know, especially when you get to the end of the book and it becomes public that Black people have superpowers, how he, you know, being a character whose ability allows him to not be killed, you know, to survive what's thrown at him, decides like, well then, like, I'll be the target in some respect, you know, like put the focus on me, and that's why he takes on the name X and stuff like that, because it's just like, it's like, I got this, you know, they can't kill me, so like they're gonna have to fail me. So, you know, he takes a different path from both of them in that respect, and that's because there are different pathways. You know, I just watched episode 4 of the new season of Atlanta. I don't know if you guys have seen it yet.
Atlanta.
Yeah, but it dives into something that's, you know, in a lot of Black people's mind, which is like reparations, and like, how do we go about that? You know, like, how do we go about that? Because I think if you ask Black people, you'll find a lot of different opinions, you know? Where it's like the world just like sees it as just like, yo, you just want money. I'm like, yes, but.
Yes, and.
Yes.
When it comes to Black's future, I know that you've seen this as a trilogy since the beginning. You said, I think you said that White is the Empire Strikes Back of the trilogy. When are you trying to wrap this up? Like, when can we be excited about the next iteration coming out? I know you can't tell us what it might be called, because I would try to ask you, but
I cannot say. It has already been plotted and written out. Like, I know where this is going and how it all ends. It'll just be about getting everybody's schedules together again so that we can wrap this last one out, and then figuring out how to do it, you know, in a certain way. I will admit that like the whole periodicals game is quite exhausting. So it's sort of like why when we did White, I told our publisher, it's like, how about we only print like a limited amount? And he was just like, what? And I was just like, I don't really feel like doing it this time around. I don't want to promote this thing every 6 months. It's just going to wear me out. I mean, every month, it's just going to wear me out. Right. And it turned out to be a great promotion piece because like those covers for White are like some of the like hardest to get comics out there. So with the third book, it's just about figuring out the logistics, you know?
Right. In a time frame that makes sense for your spirit.
But I think definitely want to get that, you know, get that going at least by the time that like people start hearing about the film. You know?
Yeah. As we wrap up, I couldn't help when I was reading through Black and, you know, exploring the idea myself of a world in which only Black people have superpowers. There was I can't remember exactly which character that said something that reminded me of this, but it reminded me of Westworld. At some point, Dolores says something like, there's beauty in what we are. Shouldn't we too try to survive? You know, we talk about Black girl magic. There's Black boy joy. There's, you know, we do our best to, you know, climb to the pinnacles of not only success, but just like being able to breathe in existence. And I just think the whole concept is so beautiful because at the end of the day, we're just trying to live our lives without, them being impeded by the authorities or Karen and Ken on the street who don't want us to barbecue or live our lives. And I think that there's a lot of beauty to the notion that we still persevere. And I think that that's something that Black really dives into and showcases so well, is that despite all of these things that have happened, despite the antagonistic nature of both our history and the particular actors within that history have done their due diligence and their best to like make us feel small and make us feel like we don't matter, that we still are beautiful creatures. Black is beautiful. That's what I felt reading the entire thing. And I am very grateful to your contribution to the art form. And I'm really excited about the future and about the movie. I hope they make a cartoon on HBO Max. I hope they do I hope they do a whole bunch of things and some spin-offs, and I'm just really excited because I think you're of course not the only, but there's so few. We've talked about representation in terms of cast or in terms of like, you know, the visual representation, but behind the scenes representation can be dismal in these arenas. So thanks for like all that you do for the culture, because I think it's so important. And I look forward to seeing what you do next. And I hope that we see you around sometime soon.
I hope so too. I mean, there's other stuff percolating, but it's definitely the intent, you know, because I feel like, you know, the people who came before me, you know, inspired me. And I think a lot of, you know, Black people in comics right now would agree that like Milestone sort of passed the baton to us and we're just running the relay and somebody's going to pick it up from us, you know, and that's the dream right there, you know, is that this is something that becomes like, it continues, it becomes bigger, it becomes stronger, and we're really seeing that value in our narratives now that's even past, you know, what we described before as cyclical. Like this to me is not like the Blaxploitation era. This is the Black economics era. It's just like, oh, you see Insecure's ratings. You saw Black Panther. You saw Get Out. Like we're talking about money now, you know. And I love that for us. You know, I love that, like, you know, we're even at this very precarious era in our history, we are still in a new territory where our stories not only have value to us, but have value to people because they just haven't seen these stories before. And even though some of it might seem like strange or foreign, or they might just be like, culture vultures, whatever, it's like, it's still very much something that is showing its value, like across, the diaspora and across like audiences. And I think that that's something that's really important.
Yeah. Before I let you go, can you tell everyone where they can find you on the interwebs that you like to be, either social media or your website?
My website's like, I haven't updated it in a while, so it's KwanzaOsayjefo.com. I'm a busy guy. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, where I may occasionally argue with people, it's at Kwanza, or on Instagram, where I do not post very much, is also at Kwanza. That's where you can find me.
Hello and goodbye, everyone. My name is Sheridan. My pronouns are she, her. You can follow me on Instagram at Island Zephyr Cooks for pics of food that I make. It's very fashion, very that.
Hey everyone, my name is Quentin. I am on a mission to get an audition for Michael B. Jordan's Static Shock project. So if you can help me, go to my Instagram and sign that petition. We're at 1,100 signatures, and we're continuing on until Michael B. finally slides into the DM. So help me make it.
Hi, my name is Rolls Andre. It was a pleasure to be here today and to talk about great issues with great people. You can find me on Instagram, Rollsie, ROLLSIE, and hopefully you'll see me on stages and screens very soon. Thank you very much.
And don't forget to follow the podcast on IG at Super Black Podcast, or you can follow us on Twitter at Super Podcast. Let us know your thoughts on our interview today with Kwanza. Once again, give him one more round of applause. Thanks for being here today. We really appreciate you, and we're really excited about everything that you're doing. And I am Zuri Washington, she, her pronouns. You can find me on IG at Zuri with a fringe on top. And don't forget, should you need heroes, we've got your back. We fear no topic, we attack. If conversation is what you lack, you'll find it here with Super Black. Bye, everybody. Bye. This revolution will not be televised because it is a podcast. I love it.